Alrighty. Today, I want to talk about Soviet stuff. We've been talking about basically only American service rifles lately, and I want to talk about basically what was the point of this rifle? What was the point of the SKS? And why did it see such little service with the Soviet Union and Russia, and so much more service in the like the Chinese bloc of communist adjacent nations? So, story begins right at the end of World War II, 1945. The Soviet Union is enamored with the German concept of the intermediate cartridge. The Soviets introduced the MP 43, MP 44, what would become the STG 44. They are pioneering what we now call the assault rifle. They started in an 8x33 cartridge, 8x33 Kurz, and the Soviets get wind of this and they think that's a fantastic idea. They had really liked the idea of semi-auto select fire rifles that can be seen in the SVT, the AVT, stuff like that. Those didn't really work out for them, but towards the end of the war, they develop the 7.62x39 cartridge, 7.62 Soviet. And to go along with that, what they want is an entirely new suite of weapons. So the SKS is going to be the new service rifle. The AK-47, yes, this is an AKM, but originally the AK-47 is going to take the place of the submachine gun. This was not intended to be the service rifle. This is going to take the place of a submachine gun. It's going to replace the Papa-Shah. It's going to replace the PPS-43, things like that. The RPD is going to be the light machine gun, and they're also going to adopt a new 9mm cartridge to replace their 7.62 Tokarevs, but that's a little bit later. Anyways, so the SKS is developed by Simonov in 1945. That's why it's the SKS 45. There's a lot of early development SKSs, and then it starts production in earnest, widespread production in 1949. And they equipped Soviet frontline troops. The AK-47, developed in 47, again begins production a few years later. And, well, let's go over the SKS a little bit. It is a 10-round fixed magazine, stripper clip fed, semi-auto only service rifle. And the AK is box magazine fed, detachable magazine, 30-round select fire, semi or full. And it becomes apparent fairly quick that regardless of the SKS having a little bit longer barrel, the AK can do everything the SKS can and more. It has more firepower, larger magazine, faster reloads. Very quickly, it becomes apparent to the Soviets that they want to make the AK-47 the frontline service rifle. And it doesn't take a long time for them to come to that realization. However, there are some problems. The original stamped receiver AK-47s are not going well being mass produced. Prototype guns, hand-fitted guns are going great, but there's some heat treating problems in the stamped receivers. And Kalashnikov gets assigned, along with his team, to find a solution to this problem. And in the interim, while he is figuring out how to properly mass produce a properly heat-treated stamped receiver, there is a stopgap, and they start making AKs with machined billet receivers. They're no longer stamped, and those are the ones you'll see instead of dimples to hold the magazine in roughly this same spot. It's a scallop cut, and you'll see that to save a little weight. They won't have the rivets because they don't need them. The trunnions are machined into the receiver. So that's a stopgap. And the AKM, as we know it, the modern stamped receiver AK, that's what the M stands for, is modernized. Kalashnikov and his team figure that out roughly 1957, 1958. And the AKM enters, again, mass production in about 1959. And that is basically the exact same time that the SKS stops production for the Soviet Union. And the Soviets basically do a hard switch over to the AK, and the SKS is reserved for rear echelon use, basically, backup use. So, why are SKSs still so prevalent regardless of the Soviets in less than 10 years basically getting rid of them and sticking with the AK? Well, the AKM, the technical data package for the AKM, didn't get released to everyone. So you had mostly COM bloc countries were given the AKM pattern within a few years of mass production. In a few years of 1959, most of the Eastern Bloc European countries had the technical data package for the AKM. However, roughly about this time, things aren't going great with China. There's a lot of tension, there's some border disputes, and the Sino-Soviet split happens before the Soviets give the AKM technical data package to the Chinese. So, the only thing they're getting in aid is, or the only thing they got in large numbers in aid were SKS rifles. And they also got the technical data package for the SKS. So while they're waiting for something like the AKM, they are mass producing the SKS because it's basically the best Soviet technology in terms of infantry rifles that they have access to. And that's why they saw so much use in places like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, because it was all disseminated from the Chinese. So that also leads into why Chinese AKs are different than Soviet AKs in terms of stamped receiver guns. I don't have an example here to show you, however, hopefully soon we'll be adding one to the collection. But the Type 56 AK is basically a big mishmash of AK-47 and AKM parts, features, really. The muzzle nuts, the grips, the angle of the furniture, the sights, the way that the gas block is assembled, the location of the vents are on the, the gas tube as opposed to the gas block, things like that. And a cool note about Chinese AKs is their receivers are 1.5 millimeters thick, and the Soviet block ones are just 1 millimeter thick. The only Soviet block AKs that have anything like that are the RPK ones with the bulged front trunnion. Basically all Chinese AKs are that sort of reinforced. Fun fact. But that's it. So really that's why it's the Sino-Soviet split that leads to the Chinese never getting the technical data package for the AKM. They end up basically reverse engineering it after some border clashes, and that's why theirs are an odd amalgamation of AK-47 and later AKM features, is because they did it themselves. They never got Soviet or Russian tooling. It was all reverse engineered. And then later on in that the Soviet new suite of weapons, the RPD would be replaced with the RPK, which is basically a long, heavy-barreled AK with a bipod. And that simplifies a lot of manufacturing logistics because they share, 99% of the parts, less, the barrel. They were also fitted typically with one 75-round drum magazine, and then instead of a 30-round stick mag, 40 rounders. 40 rounders. And yeah, just a quick little rant on why the SKS really didn't see a lot of Soviet service, but saw a lot of service in Southeast Asia, the Chinese side of the communist bloc. Basically because the Russians, the Soviets, came to the conclusion that this does everything that can, and by the time they figured out the logistics of manufacturing this gun, the Chinese had pissed them off sufficiently enough that they didn't give them the technical data package for the AKM. So, yeah, that's all we got for you today. And if you made it this long, please do like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and we'll catch you in the next one.